Good morning, viewers. Welcome to this inaugural show of the Focus on Parliament. My name is Agather Atuhaire, and I am your host. And we have started the show, the Focus on Parliament, specifically because of the indispensable role Parliament plays in democracy, of the critical roles of legislation, appropriation, oversight, and representation that we want to bring to the viewers of Civic Space TV, which is mainly a citizens' TV, the processes and business of Parliament as they happen and the analysis that we could offer. Today, to join us for our first show, I have an indomitable panel, and I'll start with Honourable Alaso. Honourable Alaso is the current acting national coordinator of the Alliance for National Transformation. Yeah, these are the colors, as you can see, of the party. But Honourable Alaso also was a member of Parliament representing Serere for how many terms? 3?
Serere and Soroti.
Serere, yes, Serere and
Soroti 2,
before
Serere
that.
1. Yeah.
Yes, so Honourable Alice, you're welcome to this show.
Thank you very much, Agatha. Good morning, viewers. I am happy to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Next to Honourable Alice, we have Jackie Kemigisa. Jackie is a journalist and researcher and worked with an organization that keeps an eye on Parliament called Parliament Watch. So she is very familiar with parliamentary processes and activities. Jackie, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
The only gentleman on the show, for the first time we have a show that has more women in this country, I think, than men, is Honourable Bernabas Tinkasimire. Bernabas Tinkasimire is Buyaga West MP, has been in Parliament for I don't know how long. Your people really trust you a lot, Honourable.
This is the fourth term.
The fourth term. Honourable Tinkasimire, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you, our host, and good morning to our viewers. You see the panel is reflecting what is in the country. We have a head who is a man, the rest are women. The other day I was asking myself, if this country is mismanaged, what will the women talk about tomorrow? Because
do you want us to go into that debate?
Well, we can't go there if you want us to go there.
The responsibilities you have assumed.
Analysis.
No, but certainly we will have to give him a quick response. And here is the quick response.
Yes.
There is only one constant that has been in Uganda all these years. And the constant is still there. Those women will change and they are very new.
But also the responsibilities don't come with the power.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that's why. So that's the brief of that debate. We can have it another time,
yes,
but
sure.
That's the brief of it now. So with my panel here, I know that we have all discussed the passing of the Speaker of Parliament, the Honourable Oulanyah, for a long time. In fact, even Civic Space has discussed it on another show called the Chat Show. But because we are starting a show on Parliament specifically, I thought we cannot start it with any other topic other than the big topic in Parliament right now, the big news and the sad news of that, of the death of the Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, Oulanyah. So, and that will be our biggest conversation today, if not the only conversation, that the senior MPs that we've brought here and the senior parliamentary reporter and researcher will talk about the legacy of the Honourable Oulanyah, and in their view, how Honourable Oulanyah steered Parliament for the 10 years when he was Deputy Speaker, and if there's anything to say about the 10 months he had spent in the seat of Speaker. So I'm going to start with you, Honourable Alice, again. You worked closely with Honourable Oulanyah. You were in the 9th Parliament where you chaired the Parliamentary Affairs Committee. What is your view of how Honourable Oulanyah steered Parliament when he deputized Honourable Kadaga as Speaker?
Okay, so thank you, Agatha. First, that I will continue to express my condolences to the family to the Parliament of Uganda, to the people of Uganda and the Acholi community in particular, because their loss is big, especially to the family. You know, when a family head dies, the rest of us can do part-time condolences, but the family really takes the brunt for the rest of their life. So my condolences on the passing on of Right Honourable Jacob Oulanyah. Secondly, then, my association with Honourable Oulanyah did not begin in Parliament. We were that category of students around 1991 or 90 there, whose students' allowances were abolished at Makerere University. And so we walked that journey under the leadership of our guild president, Honourable Norbert Mao. And the Honourable Oulanyah, I think to the best of my recollection, was speaker at that time. And I was a fresh person. And so we have had that background in our conversations all along. And even then, one of the things I would say about Honourable Oulanyah was that he was a very courageous person. One particular incident at Makerere University that day, so when we complained about our allowances, we wanted to go to the Freedom Square and then, you know, talk about it. And then they released the army for the first time, the soldiers and whatever. And I was standing with the Honourable Mao and now the late Oulanyah, the Jacob. And then I saw one policeman just do some signal with his fingers. And before we knew what was happening, there were bullets. And as I tried to take off, Honourable Oulanyah fell right there. Long and short of the story is was shot so badly, and then it damaged this spleen, and I think they had to remove it. It also damaged this pancreas. So we are talking about a man who dared to live despite the traumatizing situation he had gone through. So fast forward to the 9th Parliament, or was it even the 8th Parliament when we first met, and when he was chairing the committee of
the 7th.
Committee of Legal. Yeah, so one thing again stands out. He was a very astute, very good debater. In terms of oratory, Jacob was really good. In terms of scrutiny of the bills, the Jacob was really good. But then the other thing that came out in between, I think it was 2005 there, that parliament, was when we were confronted with the lifting of age limits. And then it was the Honourable Oulanyah's committee that had the task to handle that. I remember very well, after listening to proceedings, he came to the House and he said, those who want the term limits removed, that was the word in the report. Those who want the term limits removed are right, they are correct. And those who don't want are also correct. So all of us started screaming. We said, so what's the position from the committee? Said, you people decide, eh? And then I realized that he found himself in a very difficult situation. And for me, that is what defines the speakership in that house. I don't want us to be under any illusion that any speaker can go beyond the aspirations of the ruling party in that house. Forget. Yeah. Whether it is the late Honourable Oulanyah, it reached a point where he couldn't proceed. He had to succumb to the issues. Of course, as chair legal, one would even argue that we had the power in the house to have stopped the amendment. But that's the institution of parliament. Over years, our parliament has become very weak. Over years, even those who stand up for the truth have become countable. And you know, parliament decisions are made by numbers, so using numbers. So again, for me, when I look at what happened that time, and then fast forward, the same situation obtained during the Honourable Rebecca's time, Rebecca Kadaga. So they want to lift the age limit. It didn't matter what, as long as the state wanted it, it had to be done. Because on the background, you talk to these people and they will tell you, you know, these matters are really not very nice. They are not good for our nation. But you could really feel that they were under extreme pressure. Yeah, so really, if we have to define the legacy now, maybe we can only define it in terms of the personality and those areas where the system did not put pressure. And there you could say was very good. He passed bills. We wanted to be sure that we did a thorough job. He paid attention to detail on every bill that came into the House. And then secondly, in terms of the legacy, we can only assess Honourable Oulanyah as a deputy speaker. And you know what deputizing means? Deputizing means your boss has to give you the leeway to work. If the boss does not give you, then you can't do anything. So you just sit there. And I recall at one point, I think he sat for almost a year without chairing the House.
2 years.
Yeah, so something like that.
Okay, so what I get from what you're saying, Honourable, is that we don't have enough to assess his abilities to lead Parliament. We don't have enough ground. But I picked out a few issues from Honourable Alaso's submission that I'll come back to later. But let me first jump, Jackie, and go to Honourable Tinkasimire about the same thing. What stood out for you about Honourable Oulanyah in the 9th and 10th Parliament, where he was the Deputy Speaker?
Really, I want to thank God that on this show, I am there with a person who knew Right Honourable Oulanyah even at school time. Now my minds are running very quickly to make an assessment. I think all the bullets that got him maybe fundamentally changed his life. Because the person who is at Makerere University, the person depicted as very, very courageous, when we come now to the time he becomes a deputy speaker, what he maintains is the issue of research, speak with the evidence, the issue of timekeeping. Many times you would see him struggling with something. I think something when it came on issues that affect the ordinary person, but they are being subdued by the ruling party. He had to yield. He had to yield, but with the difficulty. Maybe him looking at his health could have compromised in one way or the other of the issues he actually stood with for. And I am even more sure, maybe if this bullet had not gotten him, he would never have even left UPC.
Why do you think the bullet made him leave UPC?
No, because it fundamentally affected his health. We who studied the political science, something they tell us in the political science class, those who want to practice tomorrow, they will say, you must fight to remain very healthy. Very, very healthy. And in the field of politics, particularly in this country, a person in the opposition, sometimes it is very difficult for you to remain healthy. You can be there, you thinking you're healthy, they will arrest you and inject some things in your body. You will never know what they have done. Maybe what we studied works for civilized world, civilized politics. But I believe, I have a belief somewhere, somehow, that this changed what he stood for. He could even have a give and take You get me? A give and take, which I think was not part of him originally.
So, Honourable, as far
He's a deputy speaker. Something that stood out with the Right Honourable was that even when you crossed paths, like us who could speak, would want the position of the ordinary person, even against our ruling own party. I remember when we were discussing the issue of budget for health, at some point, those days he was still chairing. The issues of budget in most cases he would be the one to handle, and we would have a hard time with him. So he would that particular day we would cross with him. Then the following day when we would come on the floor of the house, we are okay with him. He's no longer even thinking about it tomorrow. I mean, what happened yesterday. But other people would keep the grudge in their pockets, like, even in their heart. The whole week, you will not be given opportunity to speak. That was not right, Honourable Oulanyah. No. For me, I will miss such a leader. Because this is a leader that the nation actually needs. A nation that is characterized with so many tribes. So many tribes, you look at this Moteso will annoy you. But that is not going to happen to a person who does not keep anger.
yes.
You are debating, somebody is bringing a tribal inclination, you clash with that person and leave it there. That is a leader that in this country we have missed. And maybe to me, when you look at also his charisma, that what he wanted he would pursue it. He leaves Makerere University with a degree in agricultural economics. He says, no, this is not going to work for me. He immediately joins the law school. The law school takes 3 years. The back course, those are 4 years, plus the 4 for agricultural economics, those are 8 years. 8 years in a school. It is the priests whom I have known who pursue that career for 8 years. Others, for us, 3 years, we want to get out of school
But
and go and make money.
also at law school, Honourable. So
No, these ones are coming when I'm already working. But this man had just left the agricultural school. Then he enrolled immediately without a job. Without a job. Then he is in the UPC when he joins politics. He says the UPC is a non-starter. He abandons it and joins in NRM. When he joins in NRM, he says, this is what I want. I want to be deputy speaker. Immediately, he convinced many people. And me, who was always in the caucus, he had a lot of support. I don't know how we do convince ladies. They were always very happy to, he would convince, he had a mass support from even this other campaign when he chose to run as a speaker. He had more women supporting him than a woman candidate. And we will really miss that capacity to mobilize a different gender.
actually, the women are more mobilized by a different gender.
Maybe, but
thank you.
He was really very, very good.
Yes.
And we'll miss him. We'll miss him as a country because in NRM, he had already assumed the position of central executive. At national level, he had become a speaker. He was going to do 10 years. We don't know what the 10 years were going to look like.
Yes.
Because he only chaired 6 sessions. 6 sessions. And from there, we would think about other things. Maybe he was going to be part of the transformation. I mean, transition. The transition in this country. And
Thank
for
you,
me to be very honest,
let me go to...
For me to be very honest, compared to those who are trading, save for all the guards, the VSJ, the general, but this new crop, if he would present himself, certainly he would carry the day.
Jackie, that brings me to you. Honourable Tinkasimire has said a lot of praise. Is it typical Basimo Genze in this country, or what is your view of, you covered Parliament when Honourable Oulanyah had just become Deputy Speaker, when his boss's star was shining. You know, that time she was the popular person. What was your view of, is what they're saying about him now entirely true, or are we saying it because he's gone and we want to honor him?
I think that sometimes when we talk about like legacies, the legacies are not for the dead. The legacies are for the living. And sometimes maybe when we heap praises, it just reflects us rather than the person who is dead. But I also think like in terms, there are some points that I do agree with. For example, timekeeping, language. I think for me, like the differences in covering parliament and listening were more in the technical aspect, in terms of understanding that a law should have like legalese language, as opposed to just simply people coming on the floor of the House without necessarily having read the research, but also like read the report to be able to contribute, especially when it comes to like the amendment part, when people want to like propose clauses. So I think for me, what was interesting was just to watch the difference in the passion for like the technical language outside of, but I wouldn't say he was popular amongst members of parliament. And I think that also because he went against the laissez-faire, let people speak for speaking's sake, but he would definitely, I think I remember one time when Honourable Ekanya was attempting to strangle himself using a necktie, and in that session, Oulanyah, he literally said, Parliament is opposite the National Theatre. You could do us a favor if you went, the drama should go there to the National Theatre. This is the August House. So I think like what I found as a journalist who was covering the alienation was in him wanting members of parliament to actually be serious. And I remember like there have been on separate occasions where he was even legislating around grammar, which for me I thought was really, really fascinating to like sit through different sessions and understand that this is someone who actually reads the work that they do, but also is able to like legislate around like grammar. When I think someone had asked a question around why was the Ugandan army in Sudan? And then by then, Bernabas was prime minister. And he comes and says the Ugandan army is not in Sudan. So then the opposition is just like screaming and everyone's like, what do you mean? But there are newspapers. And then he just says, there are two countries, South Sudan and Sudan. So then so that meant that the MP's airtime was actually done based off of that. But I also think that sometimes we want to remove personal responsibilities from the individuals themselves. Like we know that parliament runs on numbers, and we know that the numbers always lean towards NRM. But also I think that key responsibilities, and this is where the conflict in mourning comes in, because traditionally we belong to a community that just wants to praise the dead without necessarily acknowledging what those are, or even sometimes giving people who have been harmed the space to either
say he wronged me.
Yeah, to also say he wronged me. So I think that when the debate is polarized around he did A, B, C, D, without necessarily saying that if you are a person in a position of power and when your personal beliefs go against the system itself that you're part of, it's also your responsibility to the people that you represent and to the people that probably believe in you to say something. And I think that the beauty of parliament is that then there is a Hansard. So even when you disagree and say it's a game of numbers, at least if you put what you think and how you think about it on the record, I think that then that we will be aware that that's like you're participating in a larger system with different moving parts and just simply one of them. So I think that for me, I would like to give like the same, I would like to hear from people who are like, listen, like your role and how you did that impacted Ugandans and continues to impact Ugandans, because if certain caveats in the constitutions are disregarded and you're part of the power play, then that means that, again, you also do have to take like the responsibility of where we are right now.
Okay. And that brings me to a question I wanted to bring back to Honourable Alaso and all of you, because we want to go back to 2004, that report of the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee. Honourable Addis said that the Honourable Oulanyah said those who were for it are right and those who are against it are right.
All right.
And he was asked, so what's the position? It reminds me of the book of Honourable Matembe. If you people have read it, there's a narration by John Kazora where he said President Museveni invited them and told them, no, this one is not a vice president. She can't even, the stories were that he was saying the people that were in positions of power that he had appointed them in were not actually in those positions. There's no lie about that. But what this reminds me was the specific story about Pulkor. Pulkor was then Director General ISO, I think. So President Museveni apparently said, how can he be a director of intelligence? He's always saying on the one hand this and on the other hand this. You never know which hand to take. So this is what Honourable Oulanyah exactly did to the parliamentarians. And so I'm going to quote for you what Honourable Oulanyah said when he tabled that report. It's a long quote, but I'll start from where he said, we are so eloquent, but I have seen even the most eloquent fail to articulate points of either for or against. When I left the seat and walked out, I had called someone to pray with me. It's an issue he even went to pray over. How do I deal with it? Because he understood the odds, the stakes, I mean. So he said, the arguments are no longer for the principle of whether we should lift or retain presidential term limits, but about those who like President Museveni and those who hate him. And that's true. The fear was if we remove them, President Museveni would stay. It was not mainly about the... So he said, yet many of us don't fall in either category. I think he took himself as neutral, impartial in that debate, which is a good thing for a speaker to have. My question to you, the panelist, is why is he judged against that, yet he did not even take any position? I have had many say he's the reason term limits were removed from the constitution. I have had many attribute his loss in the subsequent term to that. Honourable Alaso, why do you think people blamed him, yet he did not actually say remove term limits in that report?
Well, then you have three standards. There is the general expectation of the public, and which public in Uganda, I think, is also very heterogeneous. So you don't know which expectations to follow. But if we have to go by an ideal situation, then somebody would say if he did not want it, and yet he found himself presiding over it, probably would have declared his conflict of interest, probably would have let go. Many Ugandans even think people should step down. Now we live in an era where people no longer resign. The impetus, the motivation, or the level of accountability on the part of our leaders to really take those bold decisions like, let me resign because this position is not favorable. It sounds so exotic. It doesn't belong here anymore. So that is one segment. The other segment is then we make an assumption that, again, if he had taken that level of responsibility and probably pulled off, then all of us would be celebrating him as a hero or something like that. But then you get back to the real dynamics in that parliament. I really doubt that anybody would have stopped the lifting of term limits, because I was there. I saw the Honourable Hope Mwesije, I saw the Honourable Mama, I saw the money that moved around that building. The only thing that would have done to Honourable Oulanyah would have been to stop him at that level so that he begins to pay the price like the one Colonel Bogire paid, of not being able to move any further than that in his political career. That is all it would have done. But for us to expect that he would have stopped it, I think we are asking for too much. The other thing that Ugandans forget, and this goes for the elite who will be listening to this show. You sit back, you allow the voters who do not analyze those things the way you do to make the decisions on who becomes their representative in parliament. You sit back in Kampala as we are trying to look for votes. And then you expect all of a sudden that somebody who came under, power is accessed. The way I access a parliamentary seat determines how I will behave in that house. So you wait and then you try to judge behavior at that level. You are wrong. You need to go to the root of the problem. So we need to go back and see how do a majority, because that house is majority NRM, how do they access those seats? Some of them through heavily controversial elections, some of them very highly militarized, some of them a lot of money, a lot of bribery. And by the time they come into the house, they don't owe you ordinary Ugandans accountable behavior. They don't. They owe the power that gave them those positions. Yeah, that's why the Bernabas, Tinkasimire, Honourable here look like very estranged politicians. They take the battering from their own party because they try to express an independent mind. So for you to make an assessment, you need to go into the structure of that institution.
Okay.
And then the context in which we are playing politics in Uganda. Agatha, I'll tell you, I dared in that parliament stand up against corrupt permanent secretaries. They offered me money in 1 week as if they had a meeting. 7 of them, each one brought 300 million to me. Each one. So I would have been 2.1 billion shillings richer in 1 week. And I refused the money. And then information came, you've refused the money. You're going to write bad reports. Of course, I wrote bad reports.
Bad reports.
Yes, to them, about them. And they descended on me in Serere. You should have seen how the money flowed. Vehicles from Ministry of Health, vehicles from Ministry of Gender, carrying soldiers left and right. So again, you will ask yourself, if you want to survive in the politics or hang around in that parliament, you dare not speak for yourself, otherwise the fight will be too much.
Thank you, Honourable. Thank you, Honourable. And I want to make a correction. Honourable Alaso was the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee. I think I had said something different earlier. Honourable Tinkasimire, I'll bring to you the same question. You were not in that parliament that passed term limits, but you would know, because of your knowledge and experience on the role of a committee chairman or chairperson, sorry, what would another chairperson of that committee would have done differently in the case of the term limits removal?
But I think the Right Honourable Oulanyah did his best during that time. But where he takes the blame is that he was elected to the chairmanship by members of parliament.
Yeah.
And whereas he says those who are for are right, those who are against are right, those who were against, at the time they were chairing, they looked many. But because of the events that happened, like bribing members of parliament, Honourable Alaso, who was there, knows of the famous 5 million.
Yeah.
5 million by then was a lot of money. And that is the money they paid. I was privy to the knowledge that that money was dished out through my long-time friend, Honourable Theodora Sechkubo, who was a member of the 7th Parliament. Of course, it was very unfortunate. He tried for him to keep the position of the chair and say, let these people now fight. And of course, what came out as he was chairing was that they had talked to him, the powers that be. And that made him to be as if he was, I would say, a person who is too neutral. Is he God? God also
No, no,
is,
no, no.
is not
Even
also.
God is not neutral.
God has a position.
God
on
has a
everything.
position. So they expected him, a man of UPC. Remember, in the 7th Parliament, he was representing UPC. To have a position,
Ideally, but there's no UPC.
yes. It was a movement, but
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, clearly that was what he
yes.
professed.
Yes. Yes.
And that did not happen. Subsequently, when he chooses to become an independent in Iyala campaigns in the 8th Parliament, when he wants to join Iyala, and he's blocked because of people start saying, have these people talked to him? Because that's how they start. When NRM wants to take over a strong opposition member of parliament, they will first say you become in. They have two options normally: become independent if you want to run the elections, or don't run the elections.
You go to Yale.
No, not even going to Yala. You skip one term and come back next term as NRM or as independent, like Honourable Chivanzanga. So, so when they see him moving from UPC to become independent, then finally to NRM, they say, oh, this man.
The process started.
This
in
man
2004.
is the cause of the betrayal. He's the cause of the betrayal. But he's a political animal. He had to calculate his cards. And maybe when you trace what Honourable Alaso revealed, those removing functional body parts from you, which are very, very critical, you know, the function of the spleen, the gallbladder, those things are very, very critical in a human body. And he literally was living with also that position. If I have to make a mark, I must make it quickly. He did not even know how he was going to live a long life without those body parts. Those decisions are being influenced. Even those whom he would have taken a decision against, they know that one they want to exploit him. They put more pressure, and this is what I saw on the floor of the house.
Thank you, Honourable. Let me cut you short, and we hear from Jackie before we go for a break. In 3 minutes, please also comment on the report that led to the subsequent removal of term limits.
I think that for me, the if you look at it technically, and you which I think that to a large extent, Oulanyah then still was someone who is very technical around language. Like they wouldn't be, if you looked at it outside of the political context of Uganda and said legally, there's nothing wrong with the process of amending the constitution as a process, as a democratic process, but also as part of, because the constitution is a living thing. And so it reflects the sentiments of where everyone is. So I think that the position would have made sense if the country wasn't Uganda. But the country, unfortunately, is Uganda. So I think that to pick the position of neutrality is to side with the oppressor in any given situation. If someone is being battered, if someone is being beaten on the street and you say, I will stay out of it, and the person is killed, you're part of the power by you not saying something. Yeah. So I think that when we keep silent, we side with the oppressor, and I think that is something that follows you, even when you know that individually, contextually, everything else, like nothing would have changed. Literally nothing would have changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we are going to take a break and come back and talk about the same issues, the sentiments of the opposition in that parliament that I covered, that they would always prefer Honourable Kadaga in the chair because apparently the house presided over by Honourable Kadaga was more autonomous. Those were the sentiments then. We want to talk about the passing of Poma, for example, and then we will maybe wrap it up with talking about the funds for the burial of Honourable Oulanyah and what that means for the country that is struggling economically. Thank you. Welcome back from the break, viewers. We are glad you're still with us. And we are sticking to the subject of Right Honourable Speaker Jacob Oulanyah, who died on the 20th of March and will be buried sometime next week, I think 8th of April, yes. So the question before we went for a break that I wanted to put to the panelists, and you know, like we said earlier, it's not saying ill about the dead. It's just discussing what happened, where he performed to the expectations and where he did not, or where there were just perceptions. And this is one perception that I'll talk about. When I covered the 9th Parliament, like I said, there's this sentiment amongst especially the opposition, that they would prefer Honourable Kadaga, who was Speaker then in the chair, than the late Jacob Oulanyah. And there was a time, I remember I even did a story about the sentiment that Honourable Kadaga would leave only the contentious issues for Jacob Oulanyah. And that was because maybe they thought Jacob Oulanyah has no problem dealing with content or annoying the opposition. I think that's what it was. So I'll pick out the example of the Public Order Management Act, which was passed in 2013. That's when there was the big problem. I remember 5 opposition MPs being suspended and the chaos that ensued. And I think Jacob Oulanyah presided over the highest number of walkouts by Parliament, by the opposition in Parliament. What was that? What was causing that? And Honourable Alaso, you were in the opposition there. Was it a perception, like we are calling it? Was it an issue of how he handled? Did he gag the opposition, like the sentiment was? Or was it something different? How did you perceive that?
Well, if I have to use one word or two, he was only doing his master's job, period. Yeah? And you see, if we try to evaluate Honourable Oulanyah's work in that house outside the context, we get it wrong. I know that each one of us, and certainly the late Honourable Oulanyah, each one of us should know that posterity will judge us. Whatever it is we do, we will be judged, sometimes very harshly. And so that should be at the back of those that are still alive. But let me walk you through that house again. So we have a situation. First, I joined that house in 2001. And we have the Honourable Edward Sekandi, a very accomplished lawyer, a very balanced man, very friendly. Now, didn't the term limits go through? They did. It didn't matter who, what, they did. Because the system wanted it. Okay, we can be very tough on Honourable Oulanyah because he presided over that committee. The only thing that we will blame the Honourable Oulanyah for would be that he didn't take personal responsibility and say, I resign or something like that. Otherwise, apart from that, everything that has happened in that house, right from the time of Honourable Edward Sekandi, and what will happen in the future, is just a repetition. So let's walk forward. Then we get to the Honourable Kadaga, whom we in the opposition were thinking, okay, she's balanced, whatever. She would only be balanced when matters were not of interest to the powers that be.
When she's allowed to be balanced.
Yes, when she's allowed to be balanced. No wonder that thing came up, that she started, I think she wanted to first safeguard herself, So she would push all the controversial things to Honourable Oulanyah to share. After some time, you know, the Right Honourable Oulanyah also protested. There was
Age
a time,
limit.
age limit. He also boarded the plane and went out of the country. And I can tell you what happened during the age limit debate was even worse than the walkouts. So we are watching, you know, for me, I was now watching in the balcony. I was in Parliament that day in the gallery. And then from nowhere, one would think, so this is a very independent speaker. How come she allows the chamber to be invaded? You know, she had to adjourn in order for the military to take over the house. So the same thing, even a worse thing happened. So it happened with Right Honourable Edward Sekandi. It happened with the Honourable Oulanyah when he was chair legal. It happened with the Right Honourable Kadaga. It will happen with any other speaker unless the presidency of this country is changed. Period. There is not, you know, we waste our time speculating. For instance, that the Honourable Anita Among and Honourable Tayebua, what do they bring? They will bring basic bills in the house. They will pass traditional things, budget, what are those speeches of the president? Those
State of the
boring
nation.
speeches, State of the Nation. They will do that. But let me tell you, the day the system wants something, either you have a very strong, even if you have a very strong who, they will do it. And you need to talk to those speakers behind the scenes for you to appreciate what they go through. So one day they order, somebody calls and says, all your security detail is going to be removed if you don't stop the neighbor under discussion in that house. And then all of a sudden you wake up and the speaker is saying, now what's going to happen to me? Eh? And then, you know, the neighbor debate had to be stopped. Eh? So Ugandans, let us think very holistically on this matter.
We should look at the disease, not the symptom.
Yeah, because there's a monster in the house and we are trying to get Agatha's leg and get you and get you. No, the monster is too big.
Okay, so Jackie, I'll ask you the same question. I think that during the passing of the Public Order Management Act, there were allegations of he didn't allow us to present our objections. I think that day there had been contradicting order papers. One didn't have the bill and the other did. And they said he refused to allow them raise those objections. So with that basis, what do you make of that perception that he gagged the opposition in Parliament? Which is what they always said every time a speakership campaign. I am telling you the truth, Honourable. Your people, from you, I didn't hear it from you as yourself, but the opposition, there's that general feeling that no, this with the Speaker Kadaga, at least we say something, at least we are allowed to speak our minds. Was that your view when you were in Parliament then, when you were covering it?
I think that a lot, because I think that also the two personalities. Who has honey around here? Sorry. But like, the two personalities were completely different. While I think for me that the Honourable Rebecca Kadaga was more of the popular speaker in terms of they allowed MPs to just simply like take 1 hour, not really say anything, but to talk about because they wanted for speaking's sake. And I think that sometimes when you let people just simply be the children that they want to be, that also pleases them in different ways. While Oulanyah was more the disciplinary, the strict person, where he would be like, okay, can you get to the point? So I think that also a lot of like, because a lot of what happens...
What are you saying? What are you trying to say?
Exactly. So a lot of our parliament is a spectacle, it's theatre, because of the ways in which many MPs, knowing where the power source actually is, do perform. And when you have someone who is chairing the house, who is able to allow for the spectacle to happen, and that spectacle most of the time can actually lead to the possibility of your re-election, because then the media will carry that clip as, for example, Ekanya trying to like choke himself using his own tie, which is literally impossible because that's not how dying happens. So I think that
committing suicide.
I think that a lot of those sentiments also largely came from from people just being like, from the opposition members of parliament being like, at least this person is allowing us to say A, B, C, D, when they know that, one, they also don't have the numbers.
So they can vent at least.
They can vent. Yeah, there was room to vent. But while Oulanyah, you always used to say, can you keep it to time? What exactly are you trying to say? Can you get to the point? So I think that the public embarrassment then also becomes a resentment. But the Public Order Management Act, when it was being passed, I remember that debate because I was in the gallery. I think that it was very interesting to see it. I think also to a large extent, if you've been painted as the blue-eyed boy of the president, like there's only so much that you can do to go against, yet there are more benefits of being blue-eyed.
Or people will see in those lenses.
Exactly. So once the bias is there, the bias is there. But I think that he also did explain the technical aspect of, for example, the minority report that didn't have the numbers, that according to, I don't remember what rules of procedure he was citing, but he cited something like properly technical in terms of, and also the disruption and how he was calling for, and of course the Public Order Management Act, we've seen how it has been used outside of what its intention was, or maybe what exactly it was intended for is what it's being used.
Yes.
So I think that still, like, to critique him as someone who has been part of the system or the status quo that has largely oppressed the majority of Ugandans is valid. But I also think that to critique him on that side without necessarily putting in place like the context of who he was as also an individual, but also the circumstances.
Oh, but also like Honourable Alaso said,
exactly,
of what other speakers have done in his shoes.
Exactly. So I think, I don't know why he compared to other speakers.
Beating,
yeah, I feel like he always got the beating in comparison to Kadaga. Yet I think that Kadaga's president of allowing the army to violate like a sacred institution.
No, that came much later. Kadaga had spent her first term making sure she's a darling of the MPs, the Ugandans.
Yeah.
The only person she was not a darling of then was President Museveni. So I think then we still had that.
But I'm saying, like, if we're looking at precedents set, like you present a report, then there's a Public Order Management Act, but then there's a precedent that is set that military can actually come into the institution, and that will always be, now it's like a normalized thing for you. It's not uncommon for people to have, for example, there used to be those debates of who is carrying a weapon in the house and why are they being allowed. So I think that the more the fence is pushed, the worse it gets. But I also think that if we are also critiquing the fence sitters, we should also like apply the same amount of pressure on like every individual's actions that lead us to where we are.
Okay, thank you, Honourable. I'm going to ask you, basing on, she cites rules of procedure, and people have said there's no speaker that upheld the rules of procedure like Oulanyah did. Like he stuck to the rules. So when the opposition would say things like he gags us, he doesn't allow us to debate, was that based on particular rules he would flout and by denying, or was it just sentimental, emotional? What was your view in both parliaments where he was?
Right Honourable Oulanyah, good to know that many members of parliament do not read the rules. And because he had an assignment, as Honourable Alaso said, to do the bidding for the powers that be. So he had to get an escape route. And his best escape route was rules.
Yeah.
Because when, for us, he would say, under which rule?
And
you tell him the rule, because there is rule 7 and rule 8 that is sick. That a member can ask the speaker for procedure or for guidance using the general powers of the speaker. Those two rules apply anyway. Yeah.
So those are the lazy MPs rules.
Of course, they did not know, and he got them at that. Because now, if he gets a man like Zake, and he says, which rule? Zaka will just sit.
Yeah. Yes.
Will just sit. When even he has a serious point to make.
Honourable Zaka is not here to defend.
No. I have used him. He's my very good friend. And he acknowledges that he's learning.
His limitation.
He acknowledges that he's learning. So maybe at a later stage, he would be accomplished, or they would be accomplished. But now you can see where he got us off. If I would say 80% of members of parliament, when you ask them under which rule are you speaking, save for accomplished members of parliament like Honourable Alaso, will certainly quote even the exact rule. But the others, it is, I have come with either my point of order or
my newspaper clip,
or my word, and he's confused. You get me? He's confused. Sometimes that's why he would actually get annoyed. They would get to his nerves and they order them out of the house. Order them out of the house. Of course, those were unfortunate instances because at the end of the day, we had a situation, I think, of Honourable Semuju and Honourable Odongoto, where he demanded for an apology and they refused to apologize. But they had to return to the house.
Yeah, but you also know that he himself then went round.
Yes.
And called Honourable Semuju. I think they sorted things there.
Yes. And you can see, but generally, the pressure that was on him from the powers that be made him look ugly. As an individual, a person who is accomplished, anyone who does not believe that Right Honourable Oulanyah was an accomplished lawyer, an accomplished legislator, is either not telling the truth or he's lost somewhere. But he was accomplished. So in that perspective, when they see these others of him coming up like this, they don't see the pressure from behind, because the pressure is exerted either the previous night and he's called, or he's going to the house. They call him, you are going, but this is our position. This is what I want you to do. He comes, even if you argue like what? You hit your head on the rock, he will look at you. Either if you can't be confused on rules, he overrules you. And he says, I am the... Of course, when he overrules you as a speaker, you have only one option, to get out and run to court to challenge his ruling, or to bring a substantive motion to challenge him. But at the end of the day, he will end up... Then when we compare those who, the assertion you are saying, it's true, many of us during his term wanted much more the time when Right Honourable Rebecca Kadaga was in the chair. But because she allowed people to speak anything, she was not a rules woman. A rules woman. But we must also save the Right Honourable Oulanyah. The house is run on rules. Maybe he was more right. He was more right. And when you look at a number of sessions that he chaired, hardly they were having that direct influence from the powers that be. So every time he would surface, they would know he has come for some mischief. Every time he would surface, he has come for some mischief. And that made him, it was portrayed. That's why you saw even during this other campaign, the general public wanted Right Honourable Kadaga, but the powers did not want Right Honourable Kadaga.
Which goes back to what Jackie said, that within your circles, the MPs, he was not really popular in terms of we want him to be.
And even amongst us, he was popular. For that reason, that he would allow anyone to speak without rules. Without rules. You can see that we were battered during the age limit thing. Immediately we forgot that she was responsible for our battery. And started chanting Right Honourable Kale, because we knew a long history of her being very close to us.
No, I think she was more cunning than Honourable Oulanyah.
Yeah,
she
but
played her cards better than Honourable Oulanyah, because portraying and making him look ugly are the words you've used most, and they always made Oulanyah go on the defensive all the time. Recently, in an interview, he said, I am not anyone's yes man. I have a mind of my own, which functions very well. Meaning he knew that out there people are saying he's used to run his bidding. And I remember he said something like, I follow 3 principles. Is it well with God? Is it well with the law? And will I sleep at night? That for him, so you are talking about him beating you on the rules. You know, the law is a double-edged sword. So if you know it and you know it can help me please my he who calls the piper, the master, but also not be found to like act illegally, then you follow that.
And my immediate person, there is something he said about grammar. The Right Honourable also used that. As you speak, he would use it to shut you down. Because at one of the areas he specialized in during the back course time was the legislative drafting. So when we are debating, he would even take you on. And should you make mistakes, he would take you on. And that would culminate into you sitting down. So there he has finished you. That's why the opposition did not carry the day all the
this
time.
Conversation, we know why many hated him, because he wanted you to be more brilliant, more prepared.
no, Agatha, I disagree with your conclusion.
Okay.
For me, from this conclusion, what I take is this common Machiavelli saying, the end justified the means.
Yes.
So if I can get you on grammar, the same end.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I can make you talk nonsense and you like me, but on the bad day, same end. And that is it. That's what happens in that house, really.
But then the difference then comes because parliament is theatre, and performance also most of the time reflects how they will re-elect you or not based on how you could be in opposition. But if your time to shine, knowing that the end justifies the means, and you know that whether you will oppose or you will not oppose, the bill is going to go through, but you're also not allowed to even like say what you want to say on the basis of their like, okay, so what rule are you citing? Grammatically, for example, like how opposition couldn't even propose those random clauses where like the rules allow for like a clause to come on the floor of parliament, and he would take apart the clause on the basis of grammar. Also, that when you do that to an individual in a society where speaking the right English is upheld as a level of intelligence, it also does something to their spirit as someone who wants to be seen as performing. So I think that then even when you know that he's right and you know that the end result, that the end justifies, the means justify the end, you also want like in the middle there to at least say something and be portrayed as someone who is in resistance when we know that the means is just like the end.
Honourable,
Yes,
so you wanted to conclude and we got something else?
There is this thing which has been around of people saying useful idiot. The Right Honourable was a very, very bright man. So people wanted to say, actually the powers that be went, if I would say, bidded for him with all the might that they could, because they knew he would successfully craft what they want. Using his intelligence, using his experience, and also the fact that he would not take issue with you, he will switch you off during this session, then the following day he will allow you to
Because
speak.
it wasn't personal.
He will allow you to speak. But he will have failed your agenda on the previous matter, which maybe is very, very critical for the country. Then he allows you to speak maybe on the days of Francis Ayume, when we are
Immaterial
remembering
things.
Janan Rumu.
Okay.
Yes, but then I think the lesson that the speakers would really have to take out here, and I pray that the two that have come on just speak something. In all parliamentary democracies, it is the right, the aspiration, and the position, whether of IPU, Interparliamentary Union, or of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, that the opposition is allowed to express themselves. And that's where the saying comes, that the opposition will have their say, and then the ruling party will have their way. It is along those lines. And that would be a comfort zone for both. They will just know, okay, you say, you speak, and then when it comes to voting, those that be carry the day. The second thing is that really no member of parliament, okay, there may be some, but majority of members of parliament, our voters would like to hear that I said something about water. Now, so if we are told, initially it used to be 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and then now, it got to even more.
1 minute, half a minute.
Yeah, and then it is. So what is it? What is parliament? Parler, the speaking, that parliament speaking. It is something we would like them to reintroduce even when they want to have their way. The last one, for me as a conclusion, is that at the end of the day, this regime that has overstayed our welcome will use anybody. And when they use it, you go down as a hated person when they were the ones that used you to achieve the objectives. And I hope that my friends who are in power will think about how harsh posterity will be on them, even based on the perception that they should have done better, and yet in the circumstances they couldn't even do anything better, because the moment you choose to serve a dictatorship, it eats you. That is all.
So from when we think of the roles of the speaker, one of them is to balance and make sure the majority conducts business, while at the same time the minority's right to be heard is maintained. And maybe that's where Honourable Kadaga Oulanyah became more popular in those circles than Oulanyah, that you have whoever, even if they know at the end of the day, it's not our position that will carry the day, but at least we have protested, we have, done whatever it takes, which wasn't allowed much during the passing of the Poma. And I think that's where, but well, may his soul rest in peace. Briefly, in the few minutes we have left with, I don't know why I said may his soul rest in peace when we are still with him. Let's talk about
he went
that.
He went
But
on
you
the
said
20th.
he died on the 20th.
20th.
Yeah, so the
But
soul
we
is
also don't know whether he actually died on 20th. Because some people
doesn't
brought
matter.
news that he had died a week earlier.
It doesn't matter, Honourable. but so the two things that have caused commotion, and which I think the actually people where he hails from misunderstood or deliberately misconstrued, was the first is how much that was spent on flying him abroad. Because while we know 1.7 billion that was paid to the Uganda Airlines to charter him, I think the day he left, actually, the money that went out of the consolidated fund was 3.6 billion. So that caters for, and that had been planned for just 30 days. They thought he would be there for not longer than 30 days. By the time he died, it was coming to 2 months. So it could have been well over 5 billion on treatment alone. So I've seen the actually people, because it started before he died, saying that people are witches, they want him to die. But could we put perspective to that? Is there anyone who was saying that because they didn't want Honourable Oulanyah to be treated and heal? And then from that, we go into the money that is going to bury him. Initially, it was 2.5 billion, and now it has been cut twice to 1.2 billion. What does that mean? Why can't we have an honest conversation without it stirring up tribe or whatever, this and that? What does that mean for a country that has people that, can't afford just basic malaria care? Honourable Alaso, what is your view about it? 3 minutes each, so that we...
First, there is a problem in the whole debate. We are debating it as if Honourable Oulanyah sanctioned the money for himself. A sick man who is picked in his house and rushed to Mulago. It means somebody else decided to authorize the expenditure. Even now, when it comes to the burial, we are talking about it as if it is Honourable Oulanyah who is saying, use 3.2 billion to bury me. No. First, he's not going to eat their food. He has not been eating their food. He is nowhere. The man has slept. So why don't we confront the reality in this country? The reality is that Uganda is so prone to wasteful expenditure. The second reality is that the medical infrastructure in this country died long ago. Okay, you may have contradictions, but it's not Honourable Oulanyah who is the first to be taken out for treatment. And I don't know at what cost. The presidential jet in this country first took the first daughter, who was not in a critical situation like Honourable Oulanyah. She was not sick. And Mulago could have delivered her, in Zambia could have delivered her. But that jet is on the record to have flown out of Uganda years back. It's not just recent, years back, to take the young lady to deliver in Germany. And there was no uproar. So, Ugandans, one, we don't want to blame a dead man for what we are making decisions on. But two, if you want to squeeze it on the executive to make our health facilities work for us. Because I am reliably told that for a long time, Honourable Oulanyah was trying to get managed locally. He's a personal doctor, Dr. Riem, is the in charge of the Cancer Institute. For a long time, if our systems were functional, perhaps we didn't need to fly him out when we knew.
Exactly.
His
And
situation
thank you,
was
Honourable.
so
And that's
bad.
where I wanted to disagree with you, that no one is actually blaming Honourable Oulanyah for the expense on both treatment and burial. We are just interrogating the practice. That is it in order? And I don't know why people never protested during the time the first daughter went. It could be that the awareness, because now we are in social media world. It could be that the awareness, people didn't know about it at the same time, like it did with Honourable Oulanyah. But I'm going to ask Jackie to also give us her views about it in 3 minutes. And
so for me, I think that it's a systemic issue where, like Honourable Alaso had spoken. If you look at, for example, the early 90s and late 80s, when Ugandan government, spearheaded by Museveni, is transitioning into neoliberal policies that are pushed by IMF and World Bank. So that meant that certain sectors, certain welfare sectors, were then completely cut off, because again, when you go to borrow money, the profit is not immediate, like infrastructure. So then we already have a system that because again, if we're looking that we're operating within a neoliberal structure, it means that then the individual overtakes the collective. Again, so then what mushrooms is individuals who have access, or they have like proximity to wealth, can then decide that they will not be part of the system that now has terrible health infrastructure, and can go elsewhere, but using the collective's money. So I think that then the sentiment or the anger comes from the fact that if you say that you're building, or if you say that you're part of a political structure, why don't you instead invest that money into the system that would benefit everyone, rather than we who are the collective having to incur that cost over and over. And I think that that debate then comes down to what it is also just not like a country debate. It becomes like a systemic global debate around like neoliberal policies and what they have done, especially for the third world country. But I think that because I think I do agree with the sentiments of many Ugandans, because you can see how you could go to a health facility and you want, and even to get like the free
Just
kits.
Panadol.
Yeah, you know, you can't get it, but then you have someone who is being flown, yet you have to pay taxes.
Yeah.
So again, it's easier to point to individualize the problem rather than to look at the system. So I think that usually, like, even it's easy for us to have anger towards an individual versus a system to say, okay, what has failed? It's the same thing that is happening now. Prices are going up, and you have someone who's in charge of finance saying, what do you want me to do? As in, what
Even
do you...
me, I see them going up. I don't
even
know
me,
why.
I see. I don't know. There's nothing I
That's
can
what
do
the
about
minister
it.
has
Yeah,
said.
but yet, like, again, that's a reflection of neoliberal policies that individualizes systems, which mean that the poorest of the poorest will continue to suffer, and also the poorest of the poorest can't now, because the system is abstract. Like, if we say, do we know who actually authorized? Do we know who signed on that signature? Do we know which people were in a room and said that 3.5 should be the money? When the system is abstract, the immediate anger goes to the individual, because then the individual
beneficiary.
Yeah, exactly. The beneficiary is at the firing point, and of course everyone's going to fire that person because we don't want to have like the systemic issue to say.
And if I can chip in half, that money for the burial, the family will never touch it.
Of course.
I saw it during the burial of Emorimor. We never touched a coin. So it is going to be managed by technocrats up to the last shilling.
Thank you, Honourable. Honourable Tinkasimire, you have been in Parliament for 16 years now. That's correct, right? So a fourth term, this will be 16 years. You have seen the processes of appropriation, the borrowing, even now. Even the money for burial, aren't we borrowing it?
Yeah, supplementary.
And the supplementaries that come in, do you think it's a good practice? And it's really not about Honourable Oulanyah. We are saying it's about the practice of someone. You spend money
right away, the answer is that it is not a good practice. And even the Right Honourable Oulanyah himself, the information that we have come across from the time they decided to abduct him to USA, he had actually refused that he does not want to go and die from outside, does not want to go and be treated from outside, because he knows he's left with few days. He does not want to bother the country going into unnecessary debts for his treatment. He actually pressured that any money that they would want to contribute, they should get something public and put that money, instead of them saying he is taken outside, he dies from outside, they start struggling with his body, incurring unnecessary expense. That was the information. And I think because the pressure about his sickness had started building, that has been poisoned so many things, the powers that be feared. So they decided in that unconscious state, because literally he was abducted to USA. He's abducted in a chartered plane. They did not use the normal planes to go to Entebbe, check him in, and they go to USA. They were there, but they decided to use a chartered plane. Ambulance from Mulago to the airline, and he is in Seattle. He reaches there, he can't make it. The number of days that he spent there, we don't know the medical bill. You can see the struggle. A person who died how many days ago? 2 weeks. Now he's arriving today. We don't know the expense that is involved in keeping the body in funeral homes. Then they come here and make matters worse for Ugandans. We are going through a very difficult time. Like where every price of every item, particularly essential commodities, soap, salt, cooking oil, they are going up. And then for you, you are making a barrier,
2.5
a barrier budget of 2.5 billion.
Thank you, Honourable.
One
Unfortunately,
item which the Ugandans need to know that actually these were thugs who want to benefit, like these dogs which dance on the death of a cow. Huh? Item of funeral service. They are saying it was, when you total up the item, there are 3 items, it is 1.3.
1 billion.
1.3 billion. We know the most expensive funeral service in this country charges 13 million per day. The A plus which they are using, the maximum they charge is 10 million.
Yes, yes.
10 million. Even if we would be very extravagant, we cannot finish off with the A plus. We cannot finish off 300 million. So somebody was looking at pocketing, actually going to pocket 1 billion and go and raise an arcade on the death of Oulanyah.
Thank you very much, Honourable. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this show today. We thank everyone who has joined us. And the show, like we said at the beginning, this is the first one of the series of shows that will be focused on the Parliament of Uganda, its activities, the processes, and if business is being handled right. I am going to ask everyone to wish Honourable Oulanyah, who hadn't an eternal rest like I am. We thank him for the service to this country. His misdeeds, whatever the case, we have all erred in one way or the other. Thank you very much. Thank you to my camera crew. Thank you, Honourable Alaso. Please, in 1 second.
Well, to the children particularly, and to Muzei Okori, our condolences. We pray that you'll have the strength to go through this.
Jackie?
I think for me, mine is to the late Honourable himself. I hope that he has found peace finally.
Honourable Tinkasimire, your last one.
He died at a time we really needed him as a country, but to the family also they still needed him, yes, because his biggest child is still not very old, but he can take on. Really the family is going to miss him. We pray for them and also pray that the Lord receives him.
Thank you. Thank you. We wish you a very nice day, and we hope to see you next Saturday on the same show, the same time, 11 to 1 p.m. Thank you.